They say family is supposed to be your safe space, your shield from the world. But for me, it became the battlefield where every illusion I ever had shattered. It started on an ordinary Sunday, one of those days when the sun shines just enough to make you think life is calm. I was sitting in my car, parked a few houses down from my parents' place. I should have just driven off. But I didn't. My heart was pounding, and my fingers were trembling as I clutched the small USB drive in my palm, filled with secrets they never thought I'd uncover. My name is Emily. I was the quiet one in the family, the one who never talked back, who always showed up when needed, who kept her head down even when the storm was breaking over her. But not anymore. That day I was about to expose everything. Not for revenge. At least that's what I told myself, but for the truth. For the years I spent suffocating in silence. For the lies that built our family and the cracks that grew between them. And for the little girl I used to be, the one who thought love was unconditional. Growing up, I always felt like the outsider in my own home. My parents, Linda and Richard, had this way of making my older brother Jake shine. He was the golden child, the achiever, the one they proudly introduced to every guest. I, on the other hand, was the afterthought. I wasn't angry about it. Not for most of my childhood anyway. I just thought it was normal. Some kids are closer to their moms, some to their dads, and some just learn how to become invisible. Things didn't really start unraveling until I turned 17. That's when I began noticing things. Little things like hushed arguments in the kitchen, Mom's sudden silences, the way Dad's eyes would flick away when I asked simple questions. At first, I assumed I was imagining it. But the older I got, the more I began to see the gaps in the stories they told. The unexplained weekends. The missing money. The strange phone calls Jake would get in the middle of the night and pretend didn't happen. I buried all of it for years. I went to college, graduated, and got a job in digital marketing. I tried building a life outside their web, thinking distance would bring clarity. But every time I came home, it was like stepping back into a dream I didn't belong to. The walls felt colder, the silences heavier. And Jake was different too. Polished on the outside but guarded, paranoid. He barely looked me in the eyes anymore. The tipping point came 2 months ago, when my cousin Leah called me crying. She was one of the few people in the family I still trusted, one of the few who treated me like I mattered. She said, "Emily, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but something's going on. With your parents, Jake. I think you should know the truth." I didn't understand what she meant at first. But then she sent me a photo. A single blurry shot of my father, standing outside a house I didn't recognize, hugging a woman I'd never seen before. It wasn't just the hug. It was the familiarity. Ease. The way he held her like he'd done it 1,000 times. And then she told me that woman's name was Allison, and she'd been in my father's life for nearly 2 decades. I couldn't breathe. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my tiny apartment, going over every memory from my childhood, searching for signs, cracks, anything. And the more I thought about it, the more it all made sense. The unexplained business trips. The birthdays he missed. The odd tension between Mom and him that no one ever acknowledged. He had a second life. Second family. And Mom knew. The betrayal hit me like a wave I wasn't prepared for. I could have confronted them quietly. I could have screamed, demanded answers, cried. But something inside me snapped. I didn't want their rehearsed apologies or half-truths. I wanted the world to know what they really were. I wanted to drag their secrets into the light the same way they dragged me through years of emotional neglect, pretending everything was perfect. So I started digging. Leah helped me. She had contacts, people who knew things. It started with property records. Dad had bought a house under a trust name, a 5-minute drive from our old neighborhood. Then came emails, text messages, financial trails. And the most damning of all, pictures. Dozens of them. Him with Allison. With her children. Smiling. Celebrating. living a life while we were told he was working late. I couldn't believe how deep it went. Jake wasn't innocent either. He'd known all along. In fact, he'd helped cover up some of the payments. He was working with Dad's company's finances. My brother, the one who always claimed to look out for me, was knee-deep in the lies. That realization cut deeper than I expected. So I made a choice. If they could build a life on lies, I could tear it down with truth. I knew we had a family dinner coming up, Mom's birthday. Everyone would be there. The perfect audience. I spent days putting everything together. Photos, screenshots, audio recordings. I put it all into a clean, sharp presentation. It wasn't just a revenge act. It was a confession to the world. My story. Their secrets. All of it. I remember walking into that house that evening. The scent of roast chicken in the air. The fake laughter floating through the rooms. The clinking of wine glasses. Everyone pretending. Everyone playing their part. I was the last to arrive, and the moment I stepped in, Mom greeted me with a smile too wide to be real. "Emily, you made it, sweetheart." I hugged her back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. And in that moment I meant it. Because this was the day the world as they knew it was going to change. I waited till dessert. Until the lights dimmed and Dad stood up with a toast in his hand, pretending to be the perfect husband. That's when I stood too. "Actually," I said, my voice clear, "before we toast, I have something to show everyone." The room stilled. Jake froze. Mom frowned. And Dad's smile faltered. I pulled the remote from my pocket and turned on the screen behind me. The first photo appeared, Dad and Allison. Then another. And another. Timeline of betrayal. The emails. Payments. The photos with children that looked eerily like my younger self. There were gasps. My aunt dropped her fork. Leah stared at the floor. My mom's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered. But I didn't stop. I played the audio clip of Dad whispering to Allison, calling her his real love. I showed the fake documents Jake signed. And when it was over, I turned to them. My family, if you could still call them that, and said the words I'd been holding in for years. "You all built a house of lies and expected me to live in it. Well, I just burned it down." What happened next wasn't chaos. It was silence. The kind of silence that echoes louder than screams. I stood there, staring into the stunned faces of people who'd called themselves my family all my life. The silence was sharp, piercing. My chest heaved with emotion, not from satisfaction or revenge, but from the ache of everything I had carried for so long. This wasn't about destroying them. This was about finally freeing myself. But let me take you back, because the storm that erupted that night didn't start there. It had been brewing beneath the surface for years, growing in the cracks they all pretended not to see. I was the youngest in the Harris family, the overlooked daughter of Linda and Richard Harris, shadowed by my older brother Jake. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect family. My dad ran a successful logistics company. My mom hosted fundraisers and garden parties. Jake was the rising star, a business major turned executive in training at Dad's firm. And me. I was the quiet one. The creative one. I loved books more than people and often found comfort in the company of my thoughts. But even as a child I sensed it, an invisible wall between me and the rest of them. It wasn't outright cruelty. It was more subtle than that. The way my accomplishments were brushed aside. The forced smiles. The feeling that love in our home had to be earned. And no matter how hard I tried, I never seemed to do quite enough. When I was 9, I wrote a short story that won a statewide contest. I remember clutching the certificate, glowing with pride, waiting for Dad to come home. I ran to him when he walked through the door, waving it excitedly. He glanced at it, patted my head and said, "That's sweet, Em. Now go wash up. Dinner's almost ready." That was it. No celebration, no hug, no acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, I was worth noticing. Jake, on the other hand, could sneeze during a speech and be hailed as a hero. But it wasn't just the favoritism. It was the secrets, too. The nights I heard hushed conversations behind closed doors. The tension that lingered like smoke after arguments I never fully understood. And the way my mother's smile often faded when she thought no one was watching. My mother was complicated. On the surface, she was everything a picture-perfect mom should be. Organized, graceful, always composed. But I saw more than most. I saw the way her hands trembled when she thought she was alone. I saw the pills she hid behind the vitamin bottles. And I heard her cry, just once, softly on the balcony late at night. I wanted to reach out to her so badly, to ask what was wrong. But I didn't, because in our house no one asked questions, and no one gave answers. And my father, Richard Harris, was a man of power. Not just in business but in the way he carried himself. He had a commanding presence. People listened when he spoke and he knew it. But underneath that charm was something colder. Calculating. He treated relationships like transactions. Give and take, benefit and return. Even with his children. Still, I spent years trying to earn his approval. I worked hard, stayed out of trouble. Showed up to every family gathering even when I felt like a ghost. And for what? A few polite nods and the occasional "good to see you, Em." I should have stopped trying long ago. But hope can be cruel. It convinces you that love is just one more good deed away. Jake was everything I wasn't. Confident, admired, praised. He used to be kind when we were kids. We'd play video games late into the night. And he'd let me sneak candy from his stash when Mom wasn't looking. But something changed when he went off to college. He came back distant, colder. Like he'd grown up into our father's mold and left his old self behind. He stopped joking with me, started correcting me. Mocking my choices. Calling my job in marketing cute. First I thought he was just stressed. But as I'd later learn, he was hiding something too. The first real clue came one Thanksgiving when I noticed him slipping away from the dinner table to take a call. I followed out of curiosity. Not suspicion. But what I overheard stopped me cold. "No, Dad said to send the money before Friday. I already signed the documents." His voice was low, serious. He was talking to someone he didn't want overhearing. I couldn't make sense of it back then. But now I see that was the beginning. The first thread that unraveled the fabric of our carefully crafted lives. The more I looked back, the more signs I saw. The secrecy. The sudden wealth Jake seemed to have despite claiming he was barely getting by. The strange vacations Dad took alone. And most of all, Mom's growing silence. She wasn't innocent. But I don't think she was evil either. She was just tired. Defeated. I believe she knew about the affair. Probably for years. But she stayed. Because walking away would mean admitting the truth. That the life she'd built was a lie. And some people would rather drown quietly than make waves. When Leah first sent me that photo of Dad with Allison, I wanted to deny it. My heart clung to the hope that it was a misunderstanding. Maybe a business partner. Maybe an old friend. But then the emails came. The voice notes. The receipts for private school payments that had nothing to do with Jake or me. That's when I started connecting the dots. Allison wasn't just a mistress. She was a second wife, in every way except legally. She had 2 kids by him. Kids that looked so much like Jake and me it made my stomach turn. He had raised another family in secret. Loved them. Celebrated birthdays with them. Taken vacations with them. And all the while, he gave us scraps of himself. I confronted Leah about what she knew. She hesitated at first but eventually admitted that she'd suspected something for years. That once, she saw Dad at a parent-teacher night at a school 2 cities away and thought it was odd. That once, she overheard a conversation between him and a woman that didn't sound like Mom. So I asked her to help me. I didn't know exactly what I was planning. Maybe I wanted to confront him in private. Maybe I wanted to expose him in public. But mostly I wanted the truth. The whole truth. I was tired of guessing. Tired of pretending. Leah had a friend who worked in IT. He helped us trace Dad's hidden email accounts. That led to photos, files, and messages. And then to bank records. That's when Jake's name came up. He was managing a side account for Dad. One that sent monthly transfers to Allison. It was all laid out in black and white. Jake knew. He had known for years. And suddenly everything made sense. Why he defended Dad so fiercely. Why he belittled me whenever I tried to question things. He wasn't protecting our family. He was protecting the lie. I cried the night I found out. Not because of the betrayal, but because of the realization that I had been utterly alone all this time. I had no real allies. No one who stood up for me. They were all wrapped in secrets and loyalty to the image we projected to the world. But I wasn't that little girl anymore. The night before Mom's birthday dinner, I stared at my laptop screen for hours. All the evidence organized, neatly filed. I could destroy them with a click. And yet I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to do it, but because I knew what it would mean. This wouldn't be a private betrayal. This would be public. Irrevocable. It would fracture the family name, destroy reputations, end relationships. But it would also set me free. For once, I wouldn't be the silent one. I wouldn't carry their secrets. I wouldn't pretend anymore. And deep down I knew. I needed them to see me. Not as the quiet, polite daughter, but as the woman they underestimated. The one who could bring everything they built crashing down. I didn't sleep that night. Barely breathed. But when morning came I was ready. The fallout was instant. After my presentation ended. After I exposed every dirty secret they'd hidden behind perfect smiles and polished silverware, the room descended into a kind of stunned, suffocating quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. Then slowly, like a fuse catching flame, the whispers began. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for the edge of the table to steady herself. She looked at me, not with fury, but with something harder to define. Shame. Maybe even relief. My father didn't say a word. His face went blank. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitching. Jake shot up from his seat. His face red with rage. "What the hell is this, Emily?" he barked. I met his eyes, steady and calm. The truth. Something none of you had the guts to tell. People were murmuring now. My uncle leaned over to my aunt. My cousin covered her mouth in disbelief. I heard someone say, "Is this real?" Leah just stared at the floor, frozen, guilt written all over her face. Dad finally stood. "You had no right to do this here. This was your mother's birthday." I tilted my head. "And you thought that was more sacred than our entire family being a lie?" That was when Mom finally broke. She pushed her chair back, stood up slowly, and with her voice barely above a whisper she said, "Richard, is it true?" He didn't answer. Not with words. But silence. His kind of silence was always the loudest confession. The room erupted after that. Some left immediately, too uncomfortable to witness the implosion. Others stayed, whispering, watching. But the damage was done. The curtain had been pulled back, and there was no pretending anymore. What I hadn't expected was how quickly it would spread beyond that room. Someone had recorded part of my presentation. I don't know who. Maybe a cousin. Maybe even Leah. But by morning it had leaked, posted online, shared, reshared, and dissected. The internet did what it does best. Pounced. The headlines weren't about me. They were about Richard Harris, respected businessman and philanthropist, leading a double life. Photos of him with Allison, of her children, blurred for privacy, circulated. Then came articles about his firm, the shady financial transfers, questions about fraud. Snowballed fast. News vans parked outside our old house. Anonymous tipsters crawled out of nowhere. And the Harris family name, once known for wealth and prestige, became synonymous with scandal. I tried to stay away from the noise. I muted notifications, ignored messages. But the media frenzy found me anyway. Emails from journalists, people begging for interviews, old classmates reaching out with fake sympathy, hoping to ride the wave of curiosity. It was surreal. But what hurt more than the headlines was the silence from my family. Jake didn't call. Mom didn't message. Dad, of course, vanished into legal meetings and PR spin campaigns. Only Leah kept checking in, her texts short but constant. Asterisk, are you okay? Asterisk. Asterisk, thinking of you. Asterisk. Asterisk, whatever happens, you did the right thing. Asterisk. The first week was brutal. I kept replaying everything in my mind. Did I go too far? Should I have confronted them privately? Had I ruined my mother's life? I wrestled with guilt and pride, grief and liberation, all crashing together in waves. There were moments when I curled up on my bed, tears silently soaking into my pillow, wondering if I'd burned everything I'd ever loved. And other moments, quiet, powerful moments, where I stood in the mirror and whispered, "You were brave. You mattered enough to speak." One night, about 10 days after it all broke, I received a voicemail. It was Mom. Her voice was tired, softer than I remembered. "Emily, I don't know what to say. I'm not angry. I'm just broken. Maybe I always was. I guess I hoped you wouldn't see it. I don't blame you for anything. I blame myself for staying, for not protecting you, for thinking silence was safety. Love you, even if I never showed it right. Please take care of yourself." I sat on the floor and cried. Because as messy and horrible as it had all become, part of me still loved her too. Not the perfect mother I never really had, but the woman she could have been if life hadn't swallowed her whole. Jake finally sent a message too. Not a call, just a text. Asterisk. You think you're a hero. You destroyed everything. Don't contact me again. Asterisk. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It just confirmed what I'd already known. Jake was never really on my side. He was loyal only to the image, the legacy, the lie. Dad's company took a hit. Investigations were launched. Allison and her kids disappeared from public view, likely hiding from the press. And me. I started therapy. I didn't want this pain to harden into bitterness. I wanted to grow from it. To understand my worth beyond what my family did or didn't give me. I began journaling, writing down pieces of myself that had been buried for years. I reached out to people I'd lost touch with. Real friends, not just the family crowd. I even reconnected with my old English professor, who once told me I had a voice worth sharing. And slowly, life began to shift. A local magazine reached out, not for gossip, but to publish an essay I wrote about family, identity, and truth. It was the first time I told the story from my heart, not from anger. And it resonated. People wrote in, saying they'd lived through something similar. That my courage gave them permission to confront their own silence. Those messages kept me going. One said, asterisk, you didn't destroy a family. You broke the illusion of one that was already broken. That takes strength most people never find. Asterisk. I printed that one and taped it above my desk. For the first time in years I felt light. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was finally honest. Finally real. Finally seen. There's still fallout. Still pain. Rebuilding yourself after betrayal doesn't happen overnight. But there's also something beautiful in the rubble. Freedom. And if I had to go back, do it again. Because no matter how loud the world gets, the most powerful thing you can do is speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. It happened on a Wednesday morning. Gray skies, soft rain pattering the windows, when I realized I couldn't live my life trying to escape from the wreckage anymore. I had spent weeks isolating myself, floating between anger and exhaustion, watching my family's implosion from afar. But something shifted inside me as I watched the clouds roll across the sky. I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I had survived the storm I unleashed, and now I needed to decide what to build in its place. That was my turning point. I had spent years shrinking myself to fit into their story. Now it was time to write my own. I looked at the stack of notebooks on my shelf. Years of thoughts scribbled in the margins, half-finished stories, fragments of poems, memories I hadn't been brave enough to share with anyone. I flipped through them, page after page of pain, longing, hope. And that's when I knew what I had to do. I would tell my story. Fully. Publicly. Not just the scandal, but everything. What it felt like to grow up unseen. What it meant to be the daughter who sat at the edge of the table. Always quiet, always small. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted reclamation. So I reached out to the same magazine editor who had published my essay. Her name was Rachel. Kind, thoughtful, curious. When I told her I was ready to write a full memoir, she said, "Emily, this could help so many people. Let's do it right." For the first time I had control. Not over the past, but over the meaning I gave it. I quit my job at the marketing firm. It wasn't easy, financially or emotionally. But I knew I had to take that leap. I wasn't chasing safety anymore. I wanted truth. I wanted purpose. I spent days writing, pouring everything onto the page. I wrote about the silent dinners, the nights I cried into my pillow, the first time I saw my father with Allison, and the weight of secrets I carried before I ever understood them. And slowly, I began to feel lighter. Like every chapter one wrote unhooked me from the lies that used to hold me down. In contrast, my father's life was crumbling. His company's board forced him into an early leave of absence. His assets were under investigation. The media had moved on to newer scandals, but the damage was done. His name, once revered, was now whispered with scandal and shame. He withdrew from the public entirely, retreating to a vacation home on the coast, alone. Jake, who had once basked in our father's praise like sunlight, was left scrambling. The side deals he'd managed were exposed. He lost his position at the company and was now struggling to land work. His LinkedIn still read "seeking new opportunities," but we both knew the industry would think twice before trusting him again. What surprised me most was the letter. Came in a thick cream envelope with no return address. Inside was my father's handwriting. Neat, cold, calculated as always. "Emily, I know you won't want to hear from me. But I needed you to know I've read what you've written. I've seen the hurt I caused through your eyes. I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping parts of my life separate. I see now that I wasn't protecting anything, I was hiding. You always had a strength I didn't recognize until it was too late. I won't ask for forgiveness. But I hope someday you'll remember me as more than the mistakes I made. Dad." I read it 3 times. Then I burned it. Because I didn't need his guilt. I didn't need closure in the form of carefully worded regret. What I needed was to keep moving forward. My memoir draft grew. 40,000 words, then 50. Rachel connected me with a publisher who loved the concept. We picked a title. The girl at the end of the table. Honest. Simple. Devastating. As news of the book leaked through publishing circles, something unexpected happened. Other people started reaching out, not press, not gossipers. Women. People who had grown up in families like mine. Polished on the outside, shattered on the inside. They sent messages filled with quiet heartbreak. Some told me I was brave. Some said I said the words they were never allowed to speak. I felt less alone than I had in years. One day, while revising a chapter on my mother's silence, I received another message. This time from her. She wanted to meet. We hadn't spoken face to face since the night of the dinner. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me feared she'd blame me. Another part, quiet, trembling, hoped she'd understand. We met at a small cafe one town over. She looked older, like life had finally caught up with her. But there was something softer in her eyes this time. Not the cold calculation she used to carry, but something almost human. She sat down and said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I didn't know how." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I just needed one of you to see me. To really see me." "I see you now," she said. "I just wish I had sooner." We didn't fix everything in that conversation. But we started. For the first time she asked me questions about my writing, about what I wanted. About what I remembered from childhood. She told me things too. About the day she found out about Allison. About how she convinced herself that ignoring it was better than confronting it. How she thought if she kept pretending, everything might just stay intact. "But it didn't," I said. "No," she agreed. "It never does." Before we parted, she gave me something I never expected. Her blessing. "I'll read your book when it comes out," she said. "And I won't argue with anything in it. I think the world deserves to hear your side." And I think I do too. That conversation was my true turning point. It didn't fix the past, but it showed me that the future could be different. That honesty, once unleashed, could break more than silence. It could build bridges too. The next few weeks flew by. The book was finalized. Cover designed. Marketing planned. A podcast invited me on to talk about family betrayal. I was nervous, terrified really, but I said yes. I stood in that recording booth, headphones on, and told my story in my own voice. No filters. No fear. I spoke about power, about invisibility, about how secrets fester when we're told to smile through the pain. And when the episode aired, thousands of people listened. The messages poured in. One woman wrote, "Thank you. You gave me permission to stop pretending my father was a hero. He wasn't. He hurt us. And I finally said it out loud." Another said, "My daughter read your essay. And she opened up to me about things I didn't know she was carrying. You helped me be a better mom." I didn't realize it at first, but I was healing. Not just myself but others too. And it wasn't just me changing. Few weeks later, Jake reached out. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. "I've been thinking about everything. About what I knew. About how I protected Dad because I thought that's what we were supposed to do. Maybe I was scared of losing the only version of family I understood. You were right. You didn't destroy us. We were already broken. I'm not ready to talk. But I wanted you to know I'm rethinking everything." For Jake, that message was monumental. I didn't reply. Not yet. Some wounds still needed time. But I didn't hate him anymore. I pitied him. Because unlike me, he hadn't learned how to let go of the illusion yet. As the book release neared, I looked at the dedication page one last time. I had written, "To the girl I used to be. You weren't too much. You were just unheard. This is your voice now. Use it, " And I would. Because that's what truth does. Burns. Breaks. But in the ashes, something stronger begins to rise. The night of the book launch was electric. It was held at a small independent bookstore downtown, the kind of place that smelled like ink and old pages, warm light spilling through tall windows. The space was packed. Far more than I had expected. Rows of folding chairs lined the room, everyone filled. People stood along the walls, clutching copies of my book to their chests. Some had tears in their eyes before I even spoke a word. I stood behind the podium, heart pounding. A microphone waited for me, but the room was so still I didn't even need it. Took a breath. "I spent most of my life quiet," I began. "Sitting at the end of the table, listening, never speaking. But silence, I've learned, can be just as dangerous as lies. So tonight I want to thank you not just for showing up but for listening. For choosing to hear a truth that took me years to find the courage to speak. Applause. Gentle, warm. Encouraging. I read a short passage from the book. It was the one where I described walking in on my father and Allison all those years ago. How I didn't cry then, how I froze. How I swallowed that pain because I didn't know what else to do with it. When I finished, the room was hushed. I looked up and saw her. My mother. She stood at the back of the room, alone, clutching her copy of the book. Our eyes met, and she gave the smallest nod. She had come. Not for appearances. Not to control the narrative. Just to support me. On my terms. The cue backslash and a session began, and hands shot up. One woman asked how I handled the shame. Another asked if I thought families could ever be repaired after such deep betrayal. I answered honestly. Repair is possible, I said. But only if there's truth. Only if people stop hiding behind what they want the world to see, and start facing what's real. That's how healing starts. As the event wrapped, I sat at a small table to sign books. People lined up, each with their own stories, their own pain they wanted to share. I listened. I held hands. I cried with some of them. For the first time in my life, I felt seen not as someone's daughter, not as the quiet girl at family dinners, but as myself. And then, near the end of the line, came someone I never expected. He looked tired. Not the polished, arrogant version of himself I had grown up with, but raw, human. He held a copy of the book, unopened. I wasn't going to come, he said quietly. I thought maybe I didn't deserve to. I nodded slowly. Maybe you didn't. But you're here. I read it, he said, voice cracking. All of it. I hated you at first. I blamed you for everything falling apart. But the truth is I was part of it. I let it happen. I saw things I shouldn't have ignored. He hesitated, then handed me the book. I don't want you to sign it. I just want you to know. I'm sorry. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I searched his face for sincerity, and I saw it. He wasn't perfect. He never would be. But this was a start. I accept your apology, I said finally. But rebuilding trust takes time. I know, he whispered. I'd like to try. He left after that, quiet as he came. And then there was Mom. She waited until the crowd thinned. She approached my table slowly, her eyes red but soft. I finished the book this morning, she said, her voice trembling. I've never cried so much in my life. I wish I could go back and hold that little girl, you, who felt so alone. Understood. I wish you had too. I failed you, she said. I let my fear keep me frozen. But I want to do better. I want to know you, not just as my daughter, but as the woman you've become. You're strong, Emily. Stronger than I ever was. It was strange, hearing those words I had once begged for, now spoken so sincerely. I'd like that, I said softly. To try. But only if we're honest. No more pretending. She nodded. No more lies. We hugged. For the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. Later that night, after the bookstore lights dimmed and the guests had left, I stood alone on the stage. I looked out at the empty chairs, the silence echoing with voices from earlier, and I smiled. Because this was the ending I never thought I'd get. Not a fairy tale, not a perfect family reunion, but truth, healing, future. The days that followed were surreal. The book made its way to bestseller lists, not because it was sensational, but because it was honest. People were hungry for truth, for stories that spoke to the parts of themselves they were too afraid to examine. I was invited to speak at colleges, to join panels on healing from generational trauma. I sat with women who told me my book gave them the courage to leave abusive homes. I heard from men who said they finally forgave themselves for things they thought were unforgivable. My story had become something bigger than me. I moved to a small coastal town not far from the city. Quiet, peaceful. I started working on a second book. Not about betrayal but about rebuilding. About love, forgiveness, and finding joy after devastation. One morning I stood barefoot on my porch, coffee in hand, staring out at the ocean. The waves rolled in and out, constant and steady. For the first time in years I felt that way too. A message buzzed on my phone. It was from Leah. Asterisk, proud of you. When are you coming to visit me in New York? Asterisk. Smiled. We had grown closer again, slowly, carefully. She had been caught in the mess too, and we were both learning to give grace. Healing wasn't linear, but it was possible. I texted back asterisk soon. I'm ready. Asterisk. As I put my phone down, I thought about that girl I used to be. The one who sat quietly at dinners. The one who kept secrets she didn't even understand. The one who was told she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. I wish she could see me now. But maybe she can. Because I carry her with me. In every word I write, in every truth I speak, in every person I help feel seen. This isn't just my story anymore. It's proof that even the deepest wounds can heal. That even the darkest secrets can lead to light. That even betrayal, when faced with courage, can be transformed into something beautiful. Oh, redemption. And the power to begin again.